I never thought that babysitting my grandson overnight would end up being the moment I lost everything. The moment my daughter Lila left for her shift at Grady Memorial and my 7-year-old grandson whispered, "Grandma, don't go home. Mom's planning something." I took his trembling hand and fled straight to the Midtown MARTA station with nothing but my handbag and his school folder, my heart pounding as I replayed the tone in her voice last night when she asked if my pension checks still went into the joint account. I hadn't understood the question then. Now I saw it for what it was, a probe. My hands shook as I fed a $5 bill into the kiosk and picked 2 Breeze cards. Leo kept glancing up at me, that worried look kids get when they know grown-ups are pretending. We rode the southbound line in silence, my thoughts racing between Layla's sudden generosity these past months, the rides to physical therapy, the just sign here, I'll handle it papers, and the gnawing fear that I'd missed something bigger. By the time we reached East Point, I had decided not to go back to her house on Cascade Road. I unlocked the storage unit behind the old Piggly Wiggly using the spare key on my keyring. Leo helped me roll up the door. Inside were 3 cracked totes, my church hats, and an old Samsonite bag with my marriage license, my will, and the last printed statement from SunTrust. The account number was still in my name, but I couldn't shake what Leo had said. "Mom told Uncle Vince that if you get confused again, she'll take over everything," he'd mumbled on the train, picking at the Velcro on his shoes. I didn't answer. Instead, I dug out the Samsonite bag and placed it on the unit floor. Then, I pulled out the plastic sleeve marked bank. The last deposit hit October 1st. Nothing since. I used my prepaid cell to call the bank and ask about my balance. After confirming my details, the voice on the other end paused and asked if I'd recently authorized a withdrawal of $28,000. I hadn't. "I'll need to escalate this to our fraud department, ma'am," she said. Tone suddenly clipped. "Can I put you on hold?" "No," I said. "I'm coming in person." We had until 3 p.m. before the bank closed. I stuffed the file back into my bag and told Leo we were getting lunch on the way. I didn't know what I was walking into yet, but I knew I'd signed something I shouldn't have, and I was damn sure about to find out what it cost me. 3 weeks earlier, on October 3rd, I had signed over temporary access to my SunTrust savings account after Lila claimed she needed it to help manage bills while I was recovering from hip surgery. And I, doped on pain meds and trust, agreed without reading the fine print. That day is a blur of hospital lights and gauze-wrapped ankles. She stood at the foot of my bed with a manila folder and a bottle of Ensure, talking fast and smiling too wide. "Mama, this just makes it easier while you're laid up. You won't have to worry about paying anything," she said, sliding the pen into my fingers like she was handing me a straw. My hips were packed in ice and I couldn't lift my head without spinning. I remember the sharp smell of hand sanitizer, the beep of a distant monitor, and her saying something about durable power of attorney. But I didn't ask questions. I just scribbled where the yellow tabs told me to. Later, when the paperwork never returned to the plastic file box where I kept my essentials, I assumed she'd stashed it somewhere safe. She brought me soup and those cinnamon breakfast cookies I like. She drove Leo to school, ran my errands, even rubbed my feet. I told myself this was just the closeness we'd missed in earlier years, now blossoming because she finally had time to slow down. But at the bank that afternoon, standing across from a young man named Darius in a pressed blue shirt who didn't bother to hide the concern on his face, I realized how far I'd drifted from the truth. He pulled up my account, typed in a code, then turned his monitor slightly away before saying, "Mrs. Brooks, as of this morning, only the joint holder has transaction access. Your individual permissions were removed on October 12th. "I didn't authorize that," I said. He hesitated. "Well, it was initiated from the online portal under your credentials. Do you want to file a dispute?" I nodded. "And print every change since October 1st. He went to the back to get the log while I pressed my palm to my chest. The balance had dropped below 5 figures. I'd never touched that account unless it was for Leo's school fees or a car repair. I lived within my means. It was my cushion, now cut down and dressed in someone else's lies. By the time Darius returned with the printout and handed me the internal dispute form, I had already decided I would not be going back to Cascade Road. I noticed a slow erosion of control. She changed my debit card PIN for security, redirected my Social Security mail to her house on Cascade Road, and scoffed when I asked for the password to the joint banking app. But I didn't suspect true harm until I caught her whispering to her husband, "She won't even know what's missing." That phrase didn't feel like frustration. It sounded like strategy. At first, I blamed myself. I told myself it was normal to feel out of step after surgery. Maybe I had forgotten agreeing to the PIN change. Maybe it made sense for the mail to go where I was recovering. But every time I asked a question, Layla's answers got shorter, her voice colder. "Mama, just let me handle it," she'd say. "You always get overwhelmed by these things." That wasn't true. I managed our household accounts for 30 years and never bounced a check. The day I tried to log into the app myself, I sat at her kitchen table for almost an hour, entering every password combination I could remember. Each failed attempt brought a new wave of dread. When I finally asked her outright for the access, she laughed and said, "Oh, that's not the one we use anymore," without offering the new login. I looked at her, searching her face for the daughter I raised, but found only deflection. Her husband, Travis, didn't look up from his tablet. A week later, when I asked about a deposit that hadn't posted, she waved me off and said the bank was probably just slow. She had started talking to me like a child, her words full of cheer and dismissal. I recognized the tone. It was the same one I used to use on my mother when her memory started to slide. Only I wasn't sliding. I was being sidelined. It was the night Leo forgot to mute his tablet that I heard them whispering in the next room. I had sent him to bed with his cartoon shows and was gathering my papers when the words came through, "She won't even know what's missing. Not if, not maybe, just won't." I stood in the hallway without breathing, hand pressed flat against the wall, and waited for the conversation to end. When it did, I tiptoed back, kissed Leo's forehead, and lay awake for hours, replaying every missed mail piece, every avoided eye, every time she had talked just fast enough for me not to argue. That morning, I returned early from PT and overheard her on speakerphone with someone named Malik from Regions, saying I can bring the deed this week once her name's off it, which made me freeze, because the only deed with both our names was my East Point house. I stood in the hallway just outside the laundry room, holding a damp towel and the appointment card I'd forgotten to give her. She didn't hear me. Her voice was lower than usual, but her words were clear. She laughed softly and said, "No, she thinks it's just for emergencies. Don't worry. It's already notarized." Then silence, as if she were listening. "Yes, full transfer. The title company already has it queued. I just need to bring the original." I stepped backward without meaning to, and nearly knocked over the utility basket. She ended the call and walked out of the room, still scrolling on her phone, nearly bumping into me. "Oh, you're back early," she said, tone bright but eyes flickering. "How was the therapist?" My mouth was dry. I nodded and said nothing, just handed her the towel and walked toward the guest room. She didn't follow. I shut the door and sat on the edge of the twin bed, gripping the armrest with both hands to stop them from shaking. Once her name's off it. Those words kept echoing. There was no emergency, no reason to touch that deed. I had added her name 10 years ago, only for estate planning, never intending to give up control while I was alive. If she'd filed a quitclaim without my full consent, it wouldn't just be betrayal, it would be fraud. My phone was nearly dead, but I managed to open my email and search for any messages from Regions or Title Services. Nothing recent. I checked my physical folder, but it held only the old recorded deed from 2013. No new forms, no notices, no receipts. She'd said something about the title company already having it. That meant she'd submitted something. The only way that could have happened without me signing in person was with forged documents or a fake notary. I needed help. Someone who wouldn't try to soothe me. Someone who would treat this for what it was. Theft dressed in family? I texted Pastor Evan Thomas one line. "Can I bring you some papers today? It's urgent." He replied within 5 minutes. "Of course. Bring everything. We'll sort it before sunset." Panicked, I called Pastor Evan Thomas from New Life Baptist, who told me calmly, "Sister Geneva, bring every paper you got. We'll sort truth from trickery at my office before sunset," and promised to get his cousin, Attorney Charles Bennett, on standby. I didn't wait for Layla to leave again. I told her I had a hair appointment in College Park and wouldn't be back until evening. She barely looked up from her laptop, just said, "Don't forget your cane," like I was heading to the grocery store and not preparing for war. I tucked the file folders into my handbag, added the old receipts from my wallet, grabbed Leo's tablet with the recorded conversation still in the browser history, and left before I could second-guess anything. Pastor Thomas's office sat behind the sanctuary, wedged between the records room and the storage closet where they kept the folding chairs. I'd sat in there once before to talk about grief after my husband passed. The room felt smaller this time, the air heavy with unsaid truths. He closed the door behind me, gestured to the desk, and said, "Let's take this one step at a time." I spread out what I had: 2 account printouts from SunTrust, a copy of my 2013 deed, a recent letter from Social Security that had been forwarded from the Cascade Road address, and a folded piece of notebook paper I'd used to scribble every password I could remember Lila changing. He looked over each page with the same patience he used when reading troubled marriages back toward Scripture, not rushing, not flinching. When he got to the account change form, he tapped the line marked "Authorized by G. Brooks" and said, "That doesn't even match your handwriting. And she used your full name, Geneva Morris Brooks. You never write it that way." I nodded. "She said it was for emergencies while I healed." He leaned back in the chair, sighed through his nose, then picked up the phone. "Let me call Charles. You're not leaving here without real steps taken." While he waited for the call to connect, I sat frozen, looking at the shape of my own name on the forged forms. I had handed Layla the tools, but what she'd built with them, that was a whole different kind of design. Pastor Thomas passed me the phone. "He'll meet you in Westview tomorrow. 11 a.m. Bring every original you've got." While digging through the side pocket of my old handbag, I found a crumpled receipt from a notary public dated September 14th, quitclaim deed transfer Layla Brooks, which stunned me because I had never been to that address and never signed such a thing. It was late, well past 9, and Leo had fallen asleep on the church office couch under Pastor Thomas's spare choir robe. I was repacking my things, double-checking every sleeve, flap, and zipper in case I had overlooked something important. The receipt was folded small, nearly hidden under a faded Kroger coupon, and a bus transfer stub from August. The notary's office was in Buckhead, a building I hadn't stepped inside in over a decade. I unfolded it slowly, my stomach tight. The details chilled me. Notary ID 21287 GA. Witness present T. Brooks. Transaction type quitclaim deed transfer. The amount listed $0. Gift transfer. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was disbelief so thick it felt like fog pressing against my ribs. I read the line again. Gift? As if I had wrapped my home in ribbon and handed it to her out of gratitude. As if the stairs I could barely climb after surgery were now some generous offering to a daughter who hadn't even brought me my own bank statements. I took a photo of the receipt with my phone and texted it to Pastor Thomas with the caption, "Just found this. Never signed anything in Buckhead." He called me back 2 minutes later, voice tight but steady. "Do not lose that receipt. Charles will want it." I slid it into the same plastic sleeve as my original deed, careful not to crease the corner where the date was printed. It was the first physical evidence we had of a specific transaction, a thread that could be pulled. I sat back in the office chair and stared at the door, remembering how Layla had once told her friend, "My mom doesn't do digital. She still thinks email is dangerous." Maybe that was the plan all along, keep me in the dark, bet on my silence, and assume I'd never look in the right places. But I had found the paper. And now I had a name, a date, and an address. Tomorrow at 11 a.m., I would walk into Attorney Charles Benet's office with that receipt and ask one question. Can this prove what she's done? Back at the church office, I used my old Motorola to take a photo of the receipt and compared the notary stamp to one I'd used in 2020 for my will. The difference was clear. Different license number, different seal color, and the name was spelled Geneva. The copy of my will had been notarized at the public library downtown. I remembered that day clearly, the slow wait, the quiet clerk, and the sharp click of the embosser. When I held the two documents side by side under the desk lamp's yellow light, everything about them told a different story. The authentic stamp from 2020 was deep blue, registered to a Carla N. Whitaker, and included the notary's commission expiration date. The new one, the one Lila had submitted, was black, with no expiration, no county listed, and the misspelling burned into the line just above the signature, Geneva Brooks. I didn't need a handwriting expert to tell me I hadn't written that name. I had never spelled my name wrong in 63 years. I'd made my grandson redo his homework twice for flipping 2 letters. The signature itself looked like a mimicry. Close, but forced. No curve in the capital G. No tail on the final S. It was someone trying to imitate the shape of me, and failing. I snapped 3 more photos, one of the forged stamp, one of the original, and one of the names side by side. Then I created a folder on the phone labeled Proof, just that. No drama, no emotion, just the facts of what she had done. Pastor Thomas returned with a printout of the Notary Index database from the Georgia Superior Court Clerks Cooperative Authority. He pointed to the screen. "There's no licensed notary under that number in the state," he said, tapping the false ID from the forged receipt. "It doesn't exist." I breathed in through my nose, slow and careful. So even if the document was submitted, it wasn't legal. Exactly. And if someone recorded it with the county using that, it opens the door to not just fraud, but conspiracy. I placed the original will and the forged document side by side in the folder, zipped it shut, and slipped it back into my handbag. Tomorrow wasn't just about questions anymore. It was about naming the damage, clearly, publicly, and in front of someone who could take it to court. When I confronted Layla that night with the receipt, she laughed and said, "That's just a backup in case you fall again." Then added, "You really should be more grateful," as if preparing to recast my entire life as dependent and unstable. She was chopping red onions when I came through the back door. The kitchen reeked of vinegar and lemon, her usual trick to hide the smell of anything burning. Leo was still at his friend's house, and Travis was in the garage, fixing nothing as always. I placed the printed copy of the notary receipt on the counter beside the cutting board. Lila glanced down, saw the heading, and let her knife hang midair for a second. "You went through my things?" she asked, not shocked, annoyed. "No," I said. "It was in my bag, the one you said you cleaned out while I was under anesthesia." She wiped her hands on a dish towel, set the knife aside, and picked up the paper. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said, rolling her eyes. "This isn't even the real one. I had to get something notarized to hold an escrow in case things got worse. You know, a safety plan." I waited, watched. She didn't blink. "You didn't sign this," I said quietly. "Of course I did. You just don't remember." Her voice had shifted into something slower, softer, coated in condescension, like I was the confused one, the unreliable narrator of my own affairs. "Mama, after the fall, you said you were done handling the house stress. You begged me to take over. I just followed through." That wasn't true. I had said I didn't want to deal with light bulbs and roofing quotes. Not deeds, not banks, not legacy. "You really should be more grateful," she said again, this time without looking at me. "I could have just let the house sit, but I made sure everything was ready in case something happened." "What's happening is you stealing from your mother," I said. She exhaled like I'd embarrassed us both. "That's not fair. And you saying things like that could really complicate things for everyone. Everyone." That word sat heavy between us. She didn't mean the family. She meant Travis, the buyer, herself. I picked up the receipt and slid it into my coat pocket. "I'll be gone in the morning. Don't touch my papers again." Attorney Charles reviewed 3 key documents with me in his Westview office. The forged quitclaim, a bank withdrawal slip for $28,000 signed G. Brooks, and a Wells Fargo email with a changed beneficiary form I never submitted and cross-referenced the IP address logged. His office was quiet, tucked between a barber shop and a tax prep place that only opened during filing season. No receptionist, no potted plants, just a battered wooden door with his name stenciled in peeling gold letters. He offered me water, then motioned to the folding chair across from his desk. I sat down and handed over the folder marked Proof. He started with the deed, flipping slowly, reading every line. Then he pulled out the bank slip, printed in thin ink, with a slanted signature that looked almost like mine. Almost. The final document was a printed email, the header showing my name but the request to change my IRA beneficiary to M. Ellis Holdings, LLC. I stared at it, stunned. That wasn't a person. That was a shell. Charles tapped the screen of his laptop and pulled up a tracing log. "The bank registered the submission on October 8th, he said. And the metadata shows it came from an IP address registered to Grady Memorial's internal network. That's not conclusive by itself, but when combined with the account access removal and the forged deed, it paints a pattern. And not a good one, I nodded, jaw tight. I never asked to change anything. I didn't even know what an LLC was until last week. He smiled faintly, but didn't soften. It's good you caught this before the funds transferred completely. They moved the beneficiary listing, yes, but the withdrawal request got flagged. A human still has to approve certain disbursements, and that's where they hesitated. It bought us time. He turned the papers back toward me. This is enough for an affidavit. Once notarized, we can send it to the district attorney's office. It won't undo what she's done yet, but it freezes the process, and it starts a trail. The word trail felt right. Not path, not journey. A trail. The evidence left behind by someone who thought she was moving through shadows. Charles handed me a checklist and said, "Get this notarized today. We'll submit first thing tomorrow." Outside, I pressed the checklist against the steering wheel. First item, affidavit of fraud, signed and sealed by 5 p.m. The IP address traced back to Layla's work laptop at Grady, and the bank confirmed that the transfer to M. Ellis Holdings, LLC, was flagged but manually pushed through after a phone verification made by someone impersonating me. The fraud investigator at SunTrust, a woman named Ms. Kendall, met me in a small side office near the customer service area. She had already reviewed the dispute notes I'd filed with Darius and didn't waste time with small talk. Her tone was efficient, clipped, not unkind. The tone of someone who'd seen messes like this too many times and knew exactly where to look for fingerprints. She pulled up a screen that showed a time-stamped history of my online profile, logins, password resets, mobile authorizations. There it was, October 8th, 3:12 p.m., credentials used from a Grady Hospital subnet. 2 minutes later, a call had come in, verified using voice print match. I stared at the playback file, the dot wave icon blinking on her screen. "Can I hear it?" I asked. She hesitated. "It's policy to restrict playback unless it's a law enforcement request," she said. "But I can describe what was said." The transcript she read made my stomach twist. Whoever was on the line had all my details: birth date, last deposit amount, security question. They even used my church's name as my emergency contact. "Yes, I authorized the new beneficiary," the voice had said. "Yes, M. Ellis Holdings, that's correct." She lowered the file and looked at me carefully. "You're sure that wasn't you?" "Absolutely," I said. "I've never heard of M. Ellis until this week, and I don't give instructions over the phone, ever." Ms. Kendall made a notation in the internal report. "We're reopening this as suspected impersonation with internal compromise," she said. "It won't reverse the transaction yet, but it stops anything else from going through without a court order." I signed the new fraud affidavit on the spot, this time with 2 employees as witnesses. One of them, a young man with tight braids and a Delta name badge, handed me the carbon copy and said, "Keep this safe, ma'am. If they try again, this paper saves your account." On the way out, I called Charles and read the transaction reference aloud. He asked for the exact timestamp. 3:12 page M, I said. Same day as the deed submission. He didn't reply right away. Then, finally, low and sure, "We're building momentum." I drove to the Fulton County Registrar myself and learned that a title transfer was indeed pending for my home, marked as, quote, "pre-sale to investor," with a closing date set for November 10th, 2 days away. The clerk behind the glass didn't blink when I gave her my name. She typed it in, nodded once, and then asked, "Do you have the property ID or just the address?" I handed her the envelope with my deed and a copy of the tax statement. Her nails were painted gold and chipped at the edges. She took the documents, scanned the barcode, and paused mid-click. "It's in pending transfer status," she said. "Looks like it was submitted electronically on October 15th. Transfer date set for the 10th. "That's Friday," I said. 2 days from now. Buyer listed as M. Ellis Holdings, LLC. You selling to them?" I shook my head. "No, ma'am. I'm not selling anything. I didn't authorize this." Her expression changed. Just slightly, but enough. She turned her monitor slightly away, then stood and walked to a door marked Records Admin. When she came back, she had a printed ledger and a yellow sticky note with initials I didn't recognize. "Here's what I can give you without a formal stop request," she said. The title company submitted the packet, including a quitclaim and power of attorney. The notary certification is what triggered the hold. It's under internal review for mismatched signatures. I folded the papers in my lap, careful not to crease the corner with the date. "What happens if no one stops it by Friday?" I asked. "Then the deed finalizes, the transfer posts, and whoever holds the title can sell, mortgage, or renovate," she said. "It becomes their asset." I asked what I needed to halt it. She slid a trifold pamphlet through the slot. Petition to contest title transfer. Emergency injunction request. It had a barcode and instructions for expedited review. "You'll need a certified affidavit, an attorney's signature, and a judge's timestamp," she said. "Clerk's office closes at 4. You've got about an hour and 40 minutes. I took the packet and stood without speaking. My knees ached. The room felt 10 degrees hotter than when I walked in. But I knew now what she was trying to do. Not just access my money, not just play pretend with paper. She was trying to erase me from my own home before the week was out. Sitting in the parking lot of the registrar's office, clutching my keys like a shield, I felt betrayed beyond words and briefly tempted to give up, until my grandson Leo called from my burner phone just to ask if I had remembered his drawing, and I remembered why I had to fight. The call came through as I was debating whether to drive straight to Charles's office or just sit there until the courthouse lights shut off. I didn't recognize the number at first. Lila had blocked my primary cell days ago, but Leo had memorized the backup, the one I bought years ago at Walgreens and kept charged in the glove box. He sounded out of breath, like he'd run into the bathroom and shut the door before dialing. "Grandma, did you bring my picture?" he asked, voice low. I blinked hard. "What picture, baby?" "The one I made you. The one with the keys in the treehouse and your name in big bubble letters." It was folded in my wallet, right behind my Medicare card. He had drawn us standing under the magnolia tree in my backyard, each holding one end of a silver chain with a house key in the middle. Above our heads, in red crayon, he had written, "Our safe place." I closed my eyes and pressed the phone to my cheek. "Yes, baby. I have it with me," I said. "Always." He whispered, "I don't want you to go away. I think Mom's mad, but I didn't do anything bad." "You didn't," I said quickly. "None of this is your fault." There was a knock on the bathroom door in the background. I heard Layla call his name, sharp and impatient. The line went quiet. He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat for another minute, then turned the key in the ignition. No more waiting, no more second guessing. The drawing was proof enough, not in court, but in my gut. He still believed the house was ours. That meant it was still worth saving. By the time I reached Charles's office, he had already reviewed the injunction forms. He stood outside with a clipboard and a notary stamp. "You've got 1 hour to file this," he said. "I can walk it in with you, but the affidavit has to come from you." I signed. He notarized. The stamp landed with a soft thud. The fight from that moment was official. With Pastor Thomas's help, we called an emergency meeting at the New Life Baptist Fellowship Hall for November 9th at 6 p.m., inviting Lila, the quote, buyer, HOA Representative Linda Kim, and a witness from the notary office under the guise of, quote, clarifying property legacy plans. By then, word had begun to circulate. Quietly, of course, the way things always travel among Southern church folks. A few elders had asked whether I needed help moving furniture. One of the ushers slipped me an envelope with a prepaid visa, in case of trouble. No one said Layla's name out loud, but eyes lingered longer when her family walked into service. There's a kind of hush that only comes with disappointment, not gossip. It had started. Pastor Thomas reserved the fellowship hall under my name and sent out the invitations himself. No formal notice, just phone calls and direct messages to the parties involved. "You'll get more honesty when they think they're in control," he'd said. "They won't show if you call it a confrontation, but call it a clarification. They'll come." The notary witness agreed to attend after seeing a photo of the receipt I'd found. She wasn't the one who signed it and admitted the license number didn't belong to anyone currently active in the state registry. "I'll say that publicly if needed," she said. "I don't play with forgery, not with my name on the line." Linda Kim, the HOA president for my subdivision, asked twice what the meeting was really about. When I told her it involved a deed transfer and a suspected unauthorized sale, she got quiet and said, "Then I should be there. Investor sales are getting out of hand." As for Lila, I told her in person. I didn't want to give her the chance to twist it into something else. She was in the middle of seasoning chicken thighs when I stood in her kitchen doorway and said, "There's a meeting Thursday, at the church, about the house." She didn't respond at first. Then, "You can't just spring something like that on people." "It's not sprung. It's scheduled. 6-page M. Who's coming? You'll see." I turned and left without waiting for more. I had no desire to debate motives or logistics. The time for explaining myself had ended. That Thursday evening, under the soft hum of fluorescent lights in the church hall, I walked in wearing my late husband's tan blazer, dropped my folder on the folding table and said, "Let's talk about the signatures," as every head turned toward me. The room had been set with 8 metal chairs, a pot of coffee, and a tray of stale cookies someone had brought from the corner store. No one was eating. Pastor Thomas stood near the whiteboard, arms crossed. Charles sat beside me, a legal pad open, pen uncapped. Linda Kim had arrived first, in a navy blazer and sneakers, holding a clipboard with the HOA bylaws tucked beneath her arm. The notary witness, Ms. Jenkins, sat quietly in the corner, her state license number pinned to her lapel-like armor. Layla walked in 10 minutes late, wearing heels too loud for the linoleum and a white blouse she usually saved for hospital galas. Her husband trailed behind her, saying nothing. When she spotted the stack of documents on the table, her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. She didn't sit. Neither did Travis. "Before we begin," Pastor Thomas said, "this is not a disciplinary hearing, a legal deposition, or a church matter. We are here to clarify facts regarding a property transfer involving Sister Geneva Brooks and those present." I opened the folder and removed 3 pages. First, the forged deed. Then, the bank withdrawal slip. Last, the screenshot of the beneficiary change request showing the IP address and timestamp. I laid them out like cards at a poker table. "These documents were submitted in my name," I said. "But I didn't sign them. I didn't authorize them. And I didn't benefit from them." Lila rolled her eyes. "We already discussed this. You said you don't remember that week." Ms. Jenkins cleared her throat. "I can confirm," she said, "that the notary ID on that deed is fake. It doesn't match any issued in Georgia, and I've never notarized anything for this family." Charles leaned forward. "We have a forensic handwriting analyst ready to compare the signatures, but frankly, the discrepancy is obvious. My client's signature doesn't match this document, and neither does the spelling of her name." The silence that followed stretched long. Then, Layla spoke. "This is private family business. You had no right to involve outsiders." I didn't answer her. I picked up the pen beside the documents, circled the fake name, and slid it down the table toward her. One by one, I pulled out a side-by-side comparison of my real and fake signatures, an email from the notary confirming she never met me, a screenshot from Layla's laptop IP, and finally, the voicemail she'd left for Malik, which made the room fall silent, until she hissed, "This is private family business." Her voice had no weight behind it this time, just a threadbare protest. I didn't bother responding. I was already placing each item in the center of the table, slow and deliberate. The signature comparison came first. My 2020 will versus the forged quitclaim. The differences were obvious. My real signature curved, flowed, knew its shape. The forgery looked like it had been traced from a printed version, stiff at the joints and missing the familiar hook in my B. Next came the notary's email, printed on official letterhead. It stated clearly, she had never conducted any signing for me at the listed Buckhead address. Her notary seal was still in active use, but not on that document. Then I held up the screenshot from Grady's internal network showing the IP address linked to Lila's employee login. It was attached to the beneficiary change on my bank account. No room for doubt. Finally, I played the voicemail on speaker. Her voice, casual and confident, filled the hall. "Yeah, I can bring the deed. She won't even know it's gone. It's already notarized." Travis looked down at the floor. Linda Kim raised her eyebrows and jotted something on her clipboard. Ms. Jenkins folded her arms, her face unreadable. Pastor Thomas didn't move, didn't blink, just let the silence settle like ash over everything. Lila leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You act like I was trying to hurt you," she said. "You live like the past still pays bills. I was protecting what's left. You didn't see what was coming." Charles spoke then, calm and clear. Manipulating someone into transferring property under false pretenses is fraud. Forging a signature and submitting it to a title company? That's felony level. Whether you did it to protect or profit doesn't change the charge. Her eyes darted toward the exit, then back to me. For the first time, I saw the fear behind her posture, not just annoyance or deflection. Fear of what she couldn't talk her way out of. I gathered the documents back into the folder, snapped it shut, and said, "We're done pretending." Attorney Charles stood and said, "Actually, it's fraud, and we'll be submitting a notarized affidavit to the DA by morning." As Layla's smile crumbled and her husband quietly slid his chair back from the table. No one moved at first. His words hit the room like a dropped gavel. Even the hum of the ceiling lights seemed to pause. Charles remained standing, not raising his voice, not dramatizing the moment. He simply laid out the next step, as if it were routine. As if turning in a daughter for felony property theft was just a matter of paperwork and protocol. Layla's lips parted, then closed again. Her expression changed the way a mask slips. Not all at once, but enough to show what's underneath. Gone was the cool daughter, the provider, the martyr she had carefully portrayed. In its place was someone cornered by consequences. "You wouldn't," she said finally. "This is your daughter." "I'm her attorney," Charles replied, "and my obligation is to my client." Travis pushed his chair back an inch farther. He hadn't spoken all night, hadn't defended her once. Now he reached for his coat without looking at her. "This isn't happening," Lila muttered, half to herself. "You don't understand. I've covered bills, cleaned up her messes. You rewrote her life in ink she didn't approve," Pastor Thomas cut in. "You took what wasn't yours to take." Linda Kim cleared her throat. "We'll be filing a formal note with the HOA board as well," she said. "Pending the outcome of this claim, your community status will be temporarily suspended." That landed like a second blow. The HOA was Layla's last theater, the place where she still played the composed professional, the concerned daughter. Losing that platform would mean losing the narrative she'd spent months crafting. "I was trying to keep the house safe," she snapped. "No," I said quietly. "You were trying to keep it for yourself." Ms. Jenkins stood to leave, nodding to me as she gathered her things. Charles sat again and opened his briefcase, sliding in the evidence folder. The meeting was over, but the process had just begun. As I walked past Lila toward the door, she reached for my arm. I didn't pull away. I let her feel the decision in the stillness of my body, the separation she'd created, now fully drawn. Word spread fast. Lila was placed on leave from her job pending investigation. The escrow company froze the house transfer, and even her HOA access was temporarily revoked as neighbors whispered about what she tried to do to her own mama. By the following Monday, the tone of every interaction had shifted. Charles filed the affidavit with the Fulton County District Attorney's Office just after 9 a.m. The clerk logged the case under preliminary fraud, document tampering, and unauthorized financial control of a vulnerable adult. The phrasing stung. I had never seen myself as vulnerable, but Charles said the statute was our shield, and we would use every inch of it. By noon, we received confirmation from the escrow officer handling the transfer to M. Ellis Holdings. The sale had been frozen. Based on new documentation, the email read, "We have paused processing until legal review is complete." They had also sent notice to the LLC, requesting verification of the transaction's legitimacy. That reply never came. At Grady Memorial, Layla's supervisor, a tall woman named Ms. Redmond, called Pastor Thomas the same day. She asked if the church had formally reported the forgery, or if the matter was still being handled privately. He directed her to Charles. Less than 24 hours later, Lila was on administrative leave, pending internal review and ethics board evaluation. No fanfare, just silence. The kind reserved for things too serious to gossip about without guilt. Travis moved out within the week. A neighbor spotted him loading tools into his brother's truck before sunrise. No words were exchanged. The blinds at Lila's house stayed drawn. She stopped showing up to meetings. Her name vanished from the HOA group chat by Friday. Linda Kim forwarded me a formal letter from the HOA board. Due to concerns raised by a verified legal dispute involving community property, it read, "Ms. Layla Brooks is suspended from all voting and planning activity until further notice." Linda added a handwritten note at the bottom. "You were right to act when you did. I taped the note to the inside of my kitchen cabinet. beside Leo's drawing. Not because I needed the reminder, but because it mattered to see it in ink. Something solid after weeks of deceit written in false names and borrowed trust. I hadn't won. Not yet. But the doors she tried to slip through were now locked behind her. By Thanksgiving, I had regained full title control, opened a new account at Delta Community Credit Union in my name only, changed all digital passwords, and handed Leo a silver key on a new chain with the words, "Our house is safe again. Come home anytime." The title hearing was brief but final. Charles submitted our certified documents, including the affidavit, forensic handwriting opinion, and notary confirmation. The judge signed the reversal order with a single stroke, voiding the fraudulent quitclaim and returning sole ownership to me. No speeches, no apologies. Just the thud of a stamp and the clerk saying, "You're reinstated." At the bank, I closed the joint SunTrust account without ceremony. The teller asked if I wanted a cashier's check or a transfer. I said transfer, but only into the new account I'd opened 2 days earlier under my full name, Geneva Morris Brooks. No co-signers, no linked users, no automatic withdrawals. I spent the weekend locking things down. Credit freeze placed. IRS identity protection PIN requested. Health proxy refiled with my primary doctor. I even visited the DMV to update my emergency contact. The woman behind the counter raised her eyebrows when I handed her the revised form with Leo's name on it and said, "Not your daughter?" "No," I said, "not anymore." Leo came to stay that Saturday. Layla had asked if he could spend a few hours while she ran errands. She didn't ask what had been decided, what she'd lost, or whether she was still welcome in my house. She just handed over his overnight bag and left before I could speak. He unpacked in the guest room without questions, then sat on the living room floor drawing the same magnolia tree from his earlier picture. Only this time, he added a dog beside us, even though we don't own one. "That's in case we get one later," he said. I reached into the kitchen drawer and pulled out the small velvet box I'd been saving. Inside was the key I'd had cut that morning, with a silver tag engraved, "Leo's safe place." I knelt beside him and placed it around his neck. "This house is ours again," I said. "You never have to wonder." He didn't speak, just hugged me tight. And I held him longer than I needed to, not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't anymore.